नमस्कार, जय हिंद, जय भारत एंड वेलकम टू डेफ टॉक्स। दिस इज आदि अचिंत। हमारे साथ हैं डॉक्टर गीता कोचर, जिनसे हम बात करेंगे चाइना के बारे में। पिछले 6-8 महीने में चाइना के ऊपर और चाइना ने किस लोगों के ऊपर इतने मतलब 4 अत्याचार हुए हैं दोनों तरफ से, कि कहीं न कहीं हमको समझना पड़ेगा चाइना का पॉलिसी क्या है और चाइना किस तरफ आगे जा रहा है। पहले तो नमस्कार मैम, थैंक यू सो मच। वेलकम टू द शो।
Namaskar to all your viewers and Jai Hind. Again, a pleasure to be on your show as usual. So good to
थैंक यू
talk
मैम।
and discuss about things. Yeah.
मैम, मैं ये पूछना चाह रहा था, देखो अभी ये जो जिस तरह से चल रहा है चाइना का एंड अभी जो रीसेंट इवेंट्स हुए हैं, उससे एक चीज़ दिखती है कि चाइना का तेल बंद नहीं करना चाहता अमेरिका, बट उसका चाइना का तेल कंट्रोल करना चाहता है कि भई चाइना का तेल कहाँ से वो लेगा और किस तरह लेगा,
Hmm.
ही वांट्स टू कंट्रोल दैट।
Hmm.
एंड बहुत लोग बोलते हैं कि चाइना का रिएक्शन आएगा, स्पेशली वेनेजुएला के बाद चाइना ऐसे बैठेगा नहीं, 15% तेल है उसका, वहाँ पर 1 डेढ़ बिलियन डॉलर की इन्वेस्टमेंट है, वहाँ पर
Hmm.
ये है, वो है, चाइना नहीं छोड़ेगा उसको। आपको क्या लगता है, क्या रिएक्शन रहेगा चाइना का ऑन दिस वेनेजुएला इश्यू? फिर यहाँ से रिवाइंड करते हुए हम लोग पीछे चलेंगे एंड वी विल फाइंड आउट ताइवान और ये सब चीज़ों पे भी बात करते हैं। बट व्हाट डू यू से अबाउट प्योर द फैक्ट कि
Okay.
भाई चाइना का तेल अभी अमेरिका कंट्रोल करना चाहता है एंड उसको कहीं न कहीं अभी आगे जाके बोलेगा तेरे को तेल चाहिए ले ले, डॉलर दे।
Hmm. So see, I mean, China is also at odds to react. I mean, because of the tariffs, it has been imposed. अभी तो last आप लोगों को पता ही है बुसान में Xi Jinping had to meet Trump, whether willingly or unwillingly, एक negotiate किया है उन्होंने. So they know what is coming from the American side. मतलब एक प्रेशर उनके ऊपर पहले से ही बना हुआ था. अगर वो प्रेशर नहीं होता तो Xi Jinping could have got that arrogance and not, you know, met Trump at any point of time. उसको वहां जाके मिलने की कोई जरूरत नहीं थी. तो उसी से पता चल रहा है कि पहले से एक प्रेशर था. अब अगर चाइना बहुत हार्शली रिएक्ट करता है तो उसको पता है कि वो टैरिफ्स फिर से और इंक्रीज हो जाएंगे. वही 100%, 150% तक चले गया था. तो दैट माइट कम अगेन. एंड द अपार्ट फ्रॉम द सैंक्शंस, जो चिप इंडस्ट्री है उसके एक्सपोर्ट्स पे, लास्ट टाइम यूएस डिड दैट, वो बहुत ज्यादा कंट्रोल कर देगा. तो उसका जो ईवी और एक सेमीकंडक्टर्स पे जो उसको एक हासिल करना है कि भाई मैं इसमें सबसे ज्यादा कंट्रोल करूं, वो भी नहीं हो पाएगा. And third significant factor, which you said we'll discuss later, about Taiwan thing, right? So China has been encircled in ways by the Americans. Okay, so I think US is playing a very strategic role in how they need to deal with the competitor or the rising power China. Okay, now of course some people say that China has edge over certain chips, and it can also threaten because of the bonds and many of the things that have been talked by the Chinese. But when the Busan meeting happened, even before that, we could see that China was literally you know एक मतलब जैसे कहते हैं घबराया हुआ एक देश जिसे कहते हैं. I mean, he was really panicked about what is happening, and many of the scholars within China really discuss this issue, and I can detail that later. That even if they are showing the confidence that China is rising, China has risen, China has the capability, its manufacturing is strong, its economy has already overtaken US. In military capabilities, China does not fit anywhere. Especially talking about Xi Jinping, he has the urgency to prove his legitimacy and power within China by taking over Taiwan. That is known to everyone. Okay. And because over the years after Corona, we saw the economic slowdown that happened. It could not even revive back to that state. The Chinese banks are in, very bad state. Real estate has not really, taken back. So Xi Jinping himself is also under a lot of pressure within that. He has to prove himself as a great leader who is able to take up Chinese economy and Chinese, uh, the entire China as a strong power, and prove his legitimacy that he can continue to be the paramount leader for his life. Otherwise, the next tenure is not guaranteed for him. Already we see that there are these lines which are coming, some kind of breakage among the senior leaders of the party, and the Chinese, President Xi Jinping, and so many purges. I mean, I'm not going to talk about that detail because हम लोग बहुत सारी ये discussion कर चुके हैं. But
जी.
the kind of pressure Xi Jinping is facing within his party, and the questions being raised on his tenure and the kind of treatment that he has done, is a lot for him to continue. Okay, even last time, I when US China trade war went to a little more extended state, the Chinese scholars within started debating about Xi Jinping not able to deal with his neighbors, the near neighbors as well as the extended neighbors. Okay, and especially with the US China trade war, there were questions that the scholars were openly asking Xi Jinping. Of course, I mean, the actions were taken, why you are questioning regime and everything. But I mean, there were so many scholars, especially from Shanghai and other places, who are not aligned to, Beijing clique or something, or Zhejiang clique, so to say. The Shanghai clique literally came out openly and questioned Xi Jinping's policies,
Hmm.
especially the foreign policy, you know. So today, if China comes out openly and starts criticizing, Venezuelan act, the US act in Venezuela, probably, US are going to really take over again in a very assertive manner with the Chinese, and Chinese would not be able to deal with that. So I think what the Chinese would do eventually is literally a balanced and tactical move on this issue. They would try to, give these statements which they've been saying, that it is not under the international law,
Hmm. Hmm.
it should be taken to the UN, in a very, very subtle way of saying that, okay, what you have done, you have the power. They may even say that, this is a hegemonic thing. The policing of the state is not right. Sovereignty issue is questioned. All this has been coming out by Bangi's statement as well. But these
Hmm.
are statements. I mean, had it been, I mean, I've heard some people saying that as well. Had it been China feeling that Venezuela is a very close ally or something, why doesn't it take a strong action? Maybe it militarily, maybe, going out and out in support of the Venezuela. I don't think the Chinese will do that, because at the end, Chinese do not want to openly antagonize the Americans and take the blunt of that.
मैम एक
So,
थॉट प्रोसेस
yeah.
है दैट चाइना विल डू समथिंग इन ताइवान इन रिटर्न. आप उसको कितना वैलिडेट करते हो?
So the Taiwan issue is a very crucial issue for the Chinese, but many people have told me this as well, that within few days or few months, China has now got the open, uh, space to actually act the way Americans are acting, and so they will go and take over Taiwan, and the military action would be very soon. I don't
Hmm.
see so. Okay, I do not fully agree to this argument, because uh, what China has been doing for years, and what it is a long term strategy for the Chinese, is that you have to peacefully negotiate in order to take over Taiwan. Okay, so peaceful resolution of the mainland Taiwan issue is what they are looking at. And there are two reasons to it now. One of the reasons is that if they take a military action, there is no guarantee that the US will not directly or indirectly interfere in that conflict. Okay.
तो यहाँ पर एक
And
गारंटी था दैट चाइना विल नॉट डू एनीथिंग टू यूएस.
yes,
हाँ.
and this conflict can also have repercussions with Japan, taking a very strong position into it.
Yeah.
And if Japan takes a position of entering into that conflict, US will eventually have to support at least Japan, if not directly wanting to involve in the conflict. So I don't think China is in a position to engage in a direct conflict with the Americans at this point of time, because militarily they don't have that. And then there are these, I mean, many of the Americans have openly stated that America has that potential of using its bases across the globe in order to activate them. So militarily, US would not have to directly enter into the conflict, but there are ways in which it can enter the conflict, right? So
Hmm.
I think China cannot do that. The second issue is about the domestic repercussions China will face, and I'm talking about the domestic in terms of Taiwan and not mainland. Because if China takes a military action and suddenly takes over Taiwan, the Taiwanese people are not very, easy to control. Okay, there would be a utter chaos in Taiwan. Okay, much worse than what happened during the protest in Hong Kong. Okay,
mm,
so in order to maintain its supremacy and control in Taiwan, China will be at odds to do that, especially considering that it will have to topple down the current regime, the DPP regime that is there in power, and the repercussions of how the Taiwanese people will come onto streets to protest, maybe a civil war or riots or something would happen, which will not be conducive for Chinese to continue their rule in Taiwan. So at this point of time, China definitely is not prepared for a military action. It might be prepared in terms of putting pressures, the military exercise, that the justice mission that
mm,
happened,
mm, mm,
these kind of exercises as a pressure tactics, where it is getting support from opposition parties like the KMT and the TPP, right? It might also, it has already made inroads within Taiwan, where it is, floating its narrative that it is good to be with the Chinese. So if China takes a, military action today, okay, um, it would have a very counter effect on its policies and its plans, or larger objectives to rule the entire Taiwan. Okay, and if China, at one point of time, as I said, it military action by military action, it takes over Taiwan today, and there is an utter chaos in Taiwan, then its all resources and strength would be in put in place in Taiwan, which will exhaust its own resources, which are not at par today, and it needs to continue to be strong enough to counter any American influence or force. So so I don't think China is in a position right now to uh, take that action, and definitely it is not in the interest of the Chinese to take that action just to counter the Americans. And as I said, Americans are not very, they're a little ambiguous on how they are going to react to it. So I don't think there is an understanding between the Americans and Chinese as of now, that they've given a free hand to the Chinese. Okay, you take over Taiwan and it is fine with us. No, American unipolarity, American supremacy, American interest in the Pacific, everything is linked to what will happen if China takes over Taiwan. So China will only use the other strategic ways, other covert means to influence the Taiwanese, as well as to pressurize them to accept the third. One of the things I should really point out here, which many people really do not look at, China has a continuity in their policies. Okay, and if you go back to to almost 1979, I would say, when they talk about the one country two system, there was a scholar in China called Ye Chenying, okay, who came out with the 9 points guideline on to how the Chinese are going to act on Taiwan issue. Okay,
mm,
this 9 point guidelines, which were called as the Ye points, or Ye's understanding of how China needs to be done, and that was created and accepted by Deng Xiaoping, and that is how Chinese have been working on Taiwan. If you see those 9 points, you will understand what is China's policy on Taiwan and how they are going to integrate. Okay, or what we call it as a unification, a
mm,
reunification, or
mm,
whatever, what
mm,
the
mm,
Chinese would call it. So one of the points that they are mentioning is very crucial, is about the KMT and CCP's third reunification. Okay, two were happened during the civil war within China, that PRC, and this is the third unification they are talking about. Okay,
mm,
and they have constantly worked in creating that positive vibe from the KMT, which is not in power as of now.
mm.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
the people who were in power, whether the TPP and but they have the majority. You see, in the parliament, they still have the KMT and TPP together have the majority to change the policies. Okay,
Mm,
the second important thing is about the constitution of the ROC of Taiwan, where many of them have actually stated that, and this is stated clearly by the KMT people as well, KMT president as well, that the constitution does not of Taiwan looks at Taiwan as a province of China.
Mm.
Okay, so they will have to first change that. Wants to change ROC, Republic of China, to Republic of Taiwan. Okay, so that constitution itself comes into question. So I don't think that would happen. And if we go back again to Ye's proposition, he started with the second point he made was about the links, three links that they made. We
Mm.
saw that is working very smoothly about the air links and the postal linkages and all of that. Okay, the third proposition that he made, and which is where the Chinese, in continuity of presidents, are moving, is about making Taiwan as a special administrative region, something like providing them high degree of autonomy. Okay, now that is again would be questioned, because that was questioned when Hong Kong things happened. Okay, the fourth thing that Ye had proposed, and which is where the Chinese have been moving very smoothly, is about the social and economic systems of Taiwan, which might remain unchanged. So, if Taiwan is taken over militarily with an assertive action, how would they continue to maintain that social order? Would be a question in for the Chinese to deal with. And I don't think the senior cadres of the Communist Party are willing to take that pressure from the Taiwanese. The fifth important point that the Chinese leader Ye made was about that all walks of the life of people of Taiwan can participate in the national governance of Taiwan. So it is going to be something like that happened in Hong Kong, even if it is not really allowing them political inclusion, but in terms of the governance, they have to use the Taiwanese people in Taiwan. Okay, which is a model, sort of a successful model in Macau, and now of course they are able to manage it in Hong Kong. Okay, so that is where I think again the challenge might come, and there is no consensus among the Communist Party leaders that they don't want to do that. Okay, then of course what they've been doing is about providing financial subsidies and subsidizing the local finances of Taiwan, because they do not want to destroy the entire economy of Taiwan. Okay, they know the what should I say, the um, the knowledge that they have, the Taiwanese, and how their manufacturing and their economy is working. So they don't want the entire local businesses to be destroyed, because that is the edge on which the Chinese will
Mm.
move further, right? Which is what they did in Hong Kong. Hong Kong was again a part of the Four Tigers, right? Taiwan was also a part of the Four Tigers in 80s. It still
Yes.
has certain edge over its economy. So if that is completely destroyed, what is
Taiwan
that
is
China will gain? Yes,
mm.
the China will not gain anything on that. And then, the seventh point is about the Taiwanese can invest in the mainland, and which is what they've been doing. So there is a business interest linked with the Taiwanese in mainland China. So if you see in Fujian, in Zhejiang, many of the 80s to 90s, if you see the factories that were made, I mean, when the Chinese opened its store, it was the Taiwanese investment, right? Apart from the Hong Kong investment. So overseas investment was a major part of it. Today they don't want to destroy that, because then again it is not just about what will happen in Taiwan, it is also about what will happen in the mainland China,
Mm.
right? So their business manufacturing industries will be hampered, right? And they're not so very dependent on the foreign investment from western part of the world, rather than their own overseas investment from Hong Kong and Taiwan, which was the model that they created after the 80s. Okay, and the eighth point is about the freedom to settle, whether in mainland or anywhere else, by the Taiwanese. So Taiwanese can remain in Taiwan, or they can settle in the mainland, which of course they will have to allow later. And the last is of course the shared responsibility that he talked about. Is it's just that it is a responsibility of the Taiwanese as well as the Chinese, that they need to reunify at one point of time. Now, the significant aspect out here is that the Taiwanese themselves also look uh, themselves as the Chinese. They don't look themselves as another identity, so
Mm.
to say, right? So that issue itself creates that yes, reunification is the end goal of the Chinese. Now, when I say about this, Ye Jianning's whole process of how he defined and how leaders have been continuing gradually to move in this direction, even if there are, pressures from the US of what actions they take, you know, for Chinese, it is not conducive. There is no consensus within the party. There is no understanding that a military action, a forced military action on Taiwan, will yield the objectives and the
End
targets
result.
that they are, yeah,
Hmm.
end result that they are looking for. So that is why I do not see that China will take that action, even if the PLA members, some of them can be very hawkish in saying, okay, we can do the military action and all of that. But these are just, rhetorics rather than the real action.
Hmm. What I'm a little this thing about, ma'am, when you look at China, there are three things that come to mind. One, that militarily they have challenges because that power struggle is kind of taking place. So I don't know whether they are more, because each general is looking behind his back, who's coming for me, who's not.
Hmm,
That is one big thing. Second thing, मेरे को जो दिखता है कि Xi Jinping himself, obviously, as you said, कि he's wanting to cement himself for a little longer, which
hmm,
I mean seems unlikely because the system is not happy. And इसके बारे में, as you've said, I've also been reading a little bit, not as much, but the Shanghai Institute of Strategic Studies and all that, they've been asking very
hmm,
teda-meda questions, which are normally not
absolutely.
the
Hmm,
norm in China. I forget the professor Zhang Li, and there's another one who's written Zunglee, and I keep forgetting the names, ma'am. I'm a little bad with
hmm,
this, so pardon me. But in one of their articles, they actually wrote, and I say that the Chinese system today needs a complete overhaul.
hmm,
Now you don't hear that within the Chinese system, so that was very
absolutely.
interesting to me,
Hmm,
ma'am. But my question being, China's struggle or China's setup today is being disturbed. अभी if you look at अमेरिका
hmm,
ने जो
hmm,
चीजें करी हैं इसकी,
hmm,
जहाँ पर भी चाइनीज़ इन्फ्लुएंस है, वहाँ पर या तो कलर रिवॉल्यूशन हो जाता है,
hmm,
रेजीम चेंज हो रहा है। जहाँ पर
hmm,
चाइनीज़ हेवी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स हैं, दे आर ईदर बीइंग साइडलाइन्ड, सैंक्शन्ड और लिटरली टेकन ओवर लाइक वेनेजुएला।
hmm,
ठीक है जी, सेंट्रल एशिया में घुस रहा है, पाकिस्तान में घुस रहा है, म्यांमार में ही इज़ ट्राइंग टू टारगेट दैट पाइपलाइन नाउ। वेनेजुएला इज़ दिस थिंग। तो चाइनाज़ जो जो उसका चैलेंज है इज़ नॉट इन द रीजन, इज़ एक्चुअली नाउ अ ग्लोबल चैलेंज।
hmm,
Russia is doing these people, as people say, some secret deals with America. India is
hmm,
not very friendly with China right now. What does China have by itself, except for TK, fair enough, the trading power, where it says that $1 trillion worth of exports. Nobody asked the question how much subsidy you gave for that, but fair
hmm,
enough. $1 trillion worth of exports, your manufacturing dependency.
hmm.
This is what Chinese strengths are. What does he have around the world to help him?
Okay, so China is moving very strategically in certain positions. Okay, as I said, they do not want a direct confrontation with the Americans right now, which
Mm,
is not in
mm,
their interest. Okay, and within, as I said, there is a debate, and you also pointed out there's a debate within their own country where scholars and even the communist leaders are questioning whether that is in their interest, or they want to go back to old Tang's philosophy of Thao Kong Yang Hui, where you move very slowly without
reduced in right
antagonizing
direction.
directly,
Mm,
right? That is there, but at the same time, what China is doing is about two three things. Okay, one is that it understands that industrial revolution, next industrial revolution, if China can take the lead, especially in AI and other things, right,
mm,
and the quantum technology and everything, then China
mm,
will have an edge over the Americans. Okay, so they have this confidence that they can do it.
mm,
Okay, and that is where they're moving very fast. Second thing is about the domestic market. If you see the Central Work Conference that happened very recently, the 2025 conference, and the plans of the 15th 5-year plan that they have made, it is very clear that they want to put more focus on their domestic market, okay, and domestic consumption.
which is there been there for
So
about 6 years now.
yes. So basically shifting from the export oriented market to, internal consumption and internal domestic market. Okay. That would give them an edge over not being dependent on foreign players, not being
Mm,
relying or, entertained. Because I mean, globalization actually helped them in terms of, getting interlinked with the entire global world, the economies of the other countries. But now they want to literally sort of, dissect themselves, not be so dependent on other countries for their exports, because they've seen that, I mean, after the backlash that happened from the Europeans and the, Americans in terms of their exports and everything, the trade war has actually accelerated that. In
mm,
fact, if you see one of the scholars, Mukherjee, I mean, it's a very interesting article. I mean, people should read that if they are able to read Chinese or something. One of the articles that he wrote was about favorite child to abandon pawn, the shift in Trump's India policy during his second term. Now, of course, it is more directed towards what is US India relations. I'll talk that later. But the important thing that highlighted out there in the article is that he clearly mentions the supremacy at which China's economy will rise, okay, and take over American, growing decline, okay. And this is coming from one of the scholars who's at the helm of the, of economic policy making in China, okay. Now, when you and he's supposed to be the, one of the influential leader in the what we call the National Development and Reform Commission, which is the topmost economic body in China.
mm,
Okay. Now he is looking at the earlier tariff war as something which has forced China to expedite this move from dependency over other countries to internal consumption and internal domestic market. Okay, so in his opinion, it is very useful that they had that tariff war with the Americans. If not, China would have continued with the same globalization, model, and trying to be
mm,
linked with all economies and not being able to push their own objectives. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that if you see, even in the current, discussions, whether it is in the Central Work Economic Work Conference, or whether it is about the 15th, 5-year plan that they are making, it is all about, you know uh, making that divide between the Americans and the Chinese in terms of the economic integration. And the third important thing that they are doing very strategically, apart from the, technologies and, chips and everything, is about moving towards electronic vehicles, which will change their dependency on the oil. We started with that oil thing, right? Now, once the dependency on the oil and energy resources, which is, not in China so much, is broken
mm,
down, and, new things like the electronic vehicle and everything, which they have already have an advantage, and they're going to be, pushing that further in the name of green, economy, or green, environment, or whatever. That might help them in long term, not being dependent on, petrol
oil.
or other,
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
energy resources, right? And the last thing that they are doing, which is again a very subtle move, probably with the Russians, and they wanted to make it as the BRICS thing, is about the currency. Okay.
mm,
Once the RMB becomes internationalized, and once they're able to, break away with this dependence on dollar, which is
mm,
why, I mean, there are so many things that you can link about how they are purchasing the gold, and, they're accumulating a lot of gold and trying to link a new currency with the gold and all of that stuff which is coming up.
mm.
That would also give them an edge to not being, threatened by Americans in any sense. Okay. And these things are apart from what they're doing in terms of their own territories. Now, if at one point of time, without even an accelerated move, China is able to Taiwan, right? Then it already gets the territorial advantage,
Mm,
and break away with the sea lines that have a problem, like the Malacca dilemma or whatever, right? It's going to get energy over that as well. So I think Chinese are more confident in how they are moving gradually without entering into a direct conflict with Americans. But they are very aware, and there is a huge debate within China is about if there is a direct conflict with America, then not only their economy will be destroyed, their ambitions to become a superpower will be challenged greatly.
Hmm. How does he see India today? Because when you look at uh, Pakistan, Pakistan
Hmm,
literally went and sat with America.
hmm,
Recently, they had that meeting. Ishaq Dar or somebody went there. Chinese told
yes.
him, "Yeah, boss, you tell us which way you want to go now. Finally, what's your
Hmm,
game? You're here or
hmm,
there. You can't be both places."
hmm,
So that has now created a debate within Pakistan. Oh, bloody, क्या करें? अब तो चीना ने भी बता दिया है हमको ये वो and all that.
hmm, hmm,
So basically, what he's realizing is कि इतने लोगों को, he cultivated people, he cultivated Pakistan, he cultivated Bangladesh. That it all can just go, just gone. He created that
hmm,
much influence in Nepal, gone. Bangladesh, because there was nobody else giving attention, Bangladesh went to China, and whatever surrendered on America is back, gone. Pakistan, gone. So the near dear allies that he had created, India को checkmate करने के लिए वो भी चले गए. They are also
hmm,
flipping back to the Americans, although we are not happy with it, but
hmm,
neither are the Chinese, right?
hmm,
जो पाकिस्तान का check था, this, that, now I'm sure Chinese will worry about कि यार if I give this technology to Pakistan, ये तो next thing is there with the Americans.
hmm,
Asim Munir will sell it out. How do you think he has to now? Is there a conversation कि भाई let's change our policy with India? कर क्या रहे हैं हम लोग? It will not going to work like this. This is a huge power that we are. It's a growing power. He's challenging
hmm,
America and actually winning at it today without
hmm,
saying much.
hmm,
Do we change? Do we this thing? Because time and again we see that antagonism coming back with China. So what is he thinking? I'm not able to kind of figure out what is he really thinking about India now. This year, I believe Xi Jinping has to come to India also.
hmm.
BRICS.
So, so the Chinese are, you know, as pragmatic as possible. Okay, and they
Mm,
believe that in international relations, there are no permanent friends. Okay, they never. I mean, I had told in your, your channel as well earlier, and I repeat that the Chinese do not fully trust the Pakistanis. At that point of time, people were saying, "Oh, China Pakistan ka bahut close relation hai." You are saying something which does not, show that the Chinese are always helping the Pakistanis. They even during Operation Sindoor they helped and all of that stuff. But I kept on telling them, okay, there may be business interests. They want to sell their arms and ammunitions. It's a defense deal that they want to do because that helps them in their defense industry. Okay, fine, but that does not mean that the Chinese fully trust the Pakistanis. Same is the case with other countries, whether it is be it Nepal or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or maybe any other country that you're talking about, right? Except probably very close ties with North Korea and other countries which are communist countries, so to say. So for them, none of the relations are permanent relations, and none of these countries are 100% trustworthy. They can always change from this block to that block depending on their interests and the geopolitics that evolve around them, right? That is one thing. The second thing is that in order to build alliances, which for them is very crucial, and that started, I think, in 2000s, when the American whole debate about China threat theory was coming up. Okay, at that point of time itself, the Chinese started to rebuild on this notion that China threat theory has to be, literally destroyed, which they did, and create certain kind of alliances with countries, especially the military alliances, okay, which will help them for long term connections. And that is why within this last 1 or 2 years you saw that they've come out with GSI, that is the Global Security Initiative. Okay, willingly or unwillingly, they said Nepal is a part of it, even if the Nepalese later on came in and said no, no, we did not accept that and all of that stuff, but they have put that. Okay, and they
mm,
are having those kind of trilateral, bilateral and quadrilateral kind of exercises of inclusion of, say for example, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal and Bangladesh, those kind of engagements where they would push to have that kind of a alliance, which would be a military alliance for future, benefits. They do call it as, shared destiny of the mankind and all of that, but it would be something of military alliances, which
mm,
eventually might help them. And if you see the very recent, statement by the Nepalese government, is that they abide by the one China principle. And that came after the Taiwan thing, the justice mission that happened, the exercises that happened in Taiwan. So the Nepalese openly stated that. So in one sense, they are undercurrent, they are creating that kind of notion that you have to support us, for we have the might. And if you want a regional leader, if not a global leader, then China is the one. Okay. The other thing that they are doing very, you know subtly, is about creating that kind of understanding with many of the countries that, the money lies with the Chinese. So if you want your economies to grow, you have to be a part of the global development initiative of the Chinese. Okay. Where they will help you in your infrastructure development, they will help you in other, um, you know industries or whatever. And that is how you would be able to, even if it is based on loans or anything, it would be beneficial for your countries. And in this case, if you see, even South Korean president who went to China had good relations with Xi Jinping. You see, it's a regional game that they are playing. So
mm, mm,
they know that, the countries are not fully dependent. I mean, you cannot be fully dependent on uh, making a ally like what US did in terms of Japan, because that means you have to destroy that country and then build connections. That is not going to happen. But they are also, discussing issues like global governance.
mm,
They are discussing issues about new norms. So once they would be able to create that, a parallel sort of a system which is convincing for other countries to join, because as of now they're not able to come out with something that is universally applicable kind of a, proposition which other countries can accept, which the Americans floated. Whether it is about uh, international law in terms of the state behavior, whether it is in terms of creating norms around which, universally accepted norms, which involved human rights and other issues, which helped every country. Once they would be able to do that, they would be able to float and create a parallel system which will be against the American system. That is where they are having discussions and negotiations with all stakeholders of the region, be it, South Korea, be it, Bangladesh, Japan, even Japanese are going actually. Okay. And so, be it, in Nepal or Pakistan or Afghanistan, you can just name up the countries, right?
mm,
So for them, that is one action that they're doing. Now in terms of India, they're very clear that, and in fact Mao also made that statement earlier, that China India relations will eventually cool down. Okay. So they see India as uh, not being a neutral state when it becomes a two camp thing. Okay. When it has to choose between US and China. And very interestingly, for all your viewers, I mean, that is one of the interesting things Mao Khaji actually made, is, apart from the American decline and China's continuous rise, he said that, that India is going to, I mean, the US, putting sanctions on, or tariffs on, not sanctions, sorry, tariffs on India, is basically because the Americans are a little more worried about their second position in the world. That means there would be a tussle between US and India to be the second power in the world, while China will be the first power. Okay, this is a very interesting proposition that has been stated openly in his article. Okay, that is why I said everyone should read that article, which is very interesting. And so he said, that whatever Trump is doing, okay, in terms of India policy, is basically of India's transition from being Washington's darling to a discarded actor. Uh, for the reason that, the future of this relationship is, what he called as a battle for second place. This is his
mm,
terminology. Okay, uh, Yachin Zheng, he used that word, but it is basically a battle for the second place in the Asia. So he knows that, India is not a partner for a future, thing. But at the same time, most of the Chinese scholars have made this point very clearly that India is a country with which they do not see a competition coming in terms of the manufacturing, okay, at any point of time. And so they do not have to have a confrontational relationship with India, because in any case India is not going to be a threat for them at any point of time, because China is, as I said, is continuously rising. It will not slow down. Even if it is a slow progress, it is going to be always a progress. And India will not able to catch up with the Chinese. It can only be in the second position. Okay, so once you are given that second position, subservient of whatever you may call it as, then you do not see them as a direct threat. And because US is already a player to manage India in one whatever sense, they don't have to be worried about India. Okay, so for the Chinese today, they, as they do not see a direct confrontation coming from India, to have a collaborative and cooperative relationship is in their interest today and was in their interest earlier. So for example, even in 2015, if you go back, I mean, the Chinese were talking about 2+1 strategy, right? Where they said, in order to avoid all kinds of confrontations or the irritants that India creates, let's have an understanding that we two major powers in this region can have a cooperative relationship in any small country, be it Nepal or Bangladesh, rather than engaging in a fierce competition. We have a cooperative understanding and we divide these spaces. So China's strategy has always been towards India is that, one, India is not going to be a threat at any point of time. Two, India can be an irritant in their competition, in their sphere of influence. So
Mm.
negotiate with the Indians and deal with them in a manner that you do not have direct competition, but have a cooperation sort of thing, sort of a collaboration. You know, or divide these spaces where India wants to exert its influence. Say, for example, in Nepal, if India wants to exert its influence on certain sectors, including the hydropower, let them take some, sectors of it, and others we can have our own, edge over it. Okay. And third thing they are doing with for the Indians to keep in check is about creating uh, a very pro-China approach in entire South Asia. Okay, so once that pro China approach gets solidified, which actually happened when, if you see, way back in when we had these SAARC meetings, Pakistan, in even in Nepalese, they came out openly and said, China should be a part of the SAARC, right?
Mm.
So that
Mm.
is the South Asian approach that they are moving towards, where they would have greater influence in South Asia, and the South Asian powers would be supportive of China being non not a threat to them, but a very uh, what is it, useful partner for their economic development.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm.
so once that pro-China approach comes into play in South Asia, they would be able to exert more influence in the region. Even if it is challenged by the Americans, it does not really matter to them, because American challenge is not going to hamper them, because at the end they're going to come to the Indians and say, okay, look, Asia is for Asians.
Ish. Mm.
That is right. Asia is for the Asians. So we need to not let Americans come into this picture. Anyway, India is not very happy with this whole notion today that Americans should come in this region and exert greater influence. We have an experience in Afghanistan, we have it in Bangladesh, and it can continue, right? So I mean, the Chinese would be able to convince the Indians also, to the Japanese also, to the Koreans also, that because Asia is for the Asians, it is for us to decide how we are going to, govern this entire space. Now, the
Mm.
only tussle that I see between China and India might happen in terms of who will take up the leadership position in Asia. Okay, but in terms of the competition, Chinese do not see India as a competitor, as a greater competitor. So India still at is at few years behind so as to literally, threaten the Chinese that yes, we are a strong power and we can threaten your, you know, uh, your market or your, edge over economies in this region. So India has
Hmm.
not done as yet. It might take a little bit time, but today the discourse in China is all about how to manage relationship with India. So you might see that, Xi Jinping comes here, and you might even see that they are talking literally great about, the Indians, and they feel that it is very easy to please the Indians, because many of the Indians within India are also not very convinced that we should see China as an enemy country. There is no consensus in India where we see China as a enemy state, right? We do see Pakistan as an enemy state. We do not see China as an enemy state. Okay, so it is all about managing our relationship, and they know that the relationship with India is only complicated by the border problem.
Hmm.
That is the only issue. So for them, as long as they are able to manage the border issue, okay, and put that aside, I do not think that they would see India as a threat to their, supremacy or their leadership position, and they do not see that India is challenging them in global leadership position.
Funny thing is, America is seeing it
So
as a threat. They are not.
absolutely, absolutely. So Americans do see, for them, America is the only country with which they have to be a little wary. They don't have to enter into direct conflict. But for India, they feel that they have the might, the the position in which they can sit and negotiate, and so they would be much more happy to collaborate with Indians at various levels, as long as we do not raise up the border issue, we do not, ignite the Tibetan issue, which might be very, very sensitive for them. We have not done that in years. So unless until we ignite that issue, Taiwan is not a problem for India anyway, because it's very far. Uh,
Yeah, it
so
doesn't matter.
so we
Hmm.
yeah so it's a far sea, issue, and we are not really, going to be problematic for them. So within China, the scholars are of a very clear consensus that US India would have a greater understanding, but we have to make that India does not become an ally of the Americans. That's the only thing. And as of now,
Hmm.
there is a debate within India, within China, whether India will become that ally or not. But within India also, we have a debate. I mean, we are not very having this consensus that we should be, having a allied relationship with the US and let NATO come here, and all that kind of issues that we are debating. Yeah.
Hmm. Very interesting, ma'am. Thank you so much. आपने पूरा, you've taken the time to explain this to us. A lot of interesting points have come out, which
Yes.
we will need to focus on, and इसके ऊपर थोड़ी और पढ़ाई करनी पड़ेगी हमको. So
Hmm.
thank you always, as always, a pleasure. आपसे मिलके हमेशा बात करके हमेशा कुछ नया सीखने को मिलता है. Always a pleasure to talk to you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And to the audience, सबसे request है, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts, share your comments. What do you guys think is going to happen? Once again, ma'am, namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you to your viewers, and namaskar. We'll have our more conversations going. Yeah. Thank you.